In life there is a path. Some walk it with confidence, others hesitate at every turn. But what defines our journey is not just the direction we take, but the willingness to take the step in the first place. Most people live within invisible walls, walls built by fear, by comfort, by the need to remain safe. These walls are not physical, they are mental, emotional. They are boundaries we place around ourselves when we say, "What if I fail?" instead of asking, "What could I become?" Every risk you avoid becomes a door you never open, and behind each door lies growth, transformation, strength. So today, I will guide you through a simple truth: why most people choose safety over possibility, and why you must not, because real life, begins where your comfort zone ends. Let us walk that path together. Fear is one of the most powerful forces within the human mind. It has preserved life for thousands of years, guiding people away from danger, helping them avoid harm. But in the modern world, most fear is no longer physical. It is psychological. It exists not to protect the body, but to preserve the ego, the self-image, the illusion of stability. And it is this kind of fear that creates boundaries not outside of us, but within us. Invisible lines we dare not cross, not because we cannot, but because we convince ourselves we shouldn't. Most people do not realize that their lives are shaped less by what they want and more by what they fear. They make decisions based on what they are trying to avoid, rather than what they are trying to achieve. In this way, fear becomes the silent architect of mediocrity. A person may have dreams, aspirations, and talents, but if those things require stepping into the unknown, they are often abandoned quietly. The comfort of the familiar becomes more valuable than the possibility of transformation. And slowly, without even noticing, a life becomes a routine, a repetition of safe choices made over and over again. This is what is meant by illusionary limits. They are not real, they are self-imposed. They are boundaries of the mind, crafted by past experiences, by childhood programming, by society's definitions of success and failure. These limits take many forms. One person believes they are not smart enough to start a business. Another believes they are too old to begin again. Someone else thinks they are not strong enough to speak their truth. None of these limitations exist in the physical world. They exist only in thought. But because thought influences action, these mental walls become prisons that people live inside for years, even lifetimes. To step beyond these illusionary limits requires awareness. You must first observe the fear, not judge it, not try to eliminate it, but understand it. Ask yourself, what is it I'm afraid will happen? What is the story I am telling myself about this risk? When you begin to question fear, it begins to shrink. It no longer hides in the shadows. It comes into the light, and in the light, you begin to see clearly. Often, you realize that the fear is based on nothing more than a memory or a possibility, not a reality. Many people assume that courage means the absence of fear, but that is not true. Courage is the decision to act despite fear. It is the understanding that fear is a natural part of any worthwhile journey. In fact, fear often signals that you are standing on the edge of something meaningful. When you feel resistance, when you feel hesitation, it usually means that beyond this moment lies growth. The body knows it will be challenged. The mind knows it will be tested, but the soul also knows it will be elevated. The path of personal growth is never found in comfort. Growth requires effort. It requires risk. You must leave behind the shore to discover new oceans. And yes, there is always the chance that the boat will rock, that the wind will be strong, that the direction will not be clear. But the greater danger is remaining still, because the longer you stay within your illusionary limits, the more real they begin to feel. The mind adapts to the small space you give it. You begin to believe this is all you are capable of. That belief becomes identity. An identity, once formed, is difficult to change unless you are willing to confront the very fears that created it. To challenge fear is to reclaim power. It is to take back control from the unconscious programming that has kept you small. When you act in the face of fear, even in small ways, you send a message to yourself. I am capable of more. I am not my past. I am not my thoughts. I am not these imaginary boundaries. you begin to build a new identity, one based on action, courage, and possibility. The world around you may not change immediately, but your internal world does. You begin to see opportunities instead of obstacles. You notice how much time and energy you once spent avoiding discomfort, rather than pursuing potential. What most people fail to realize is that every person they admire, every leader, every creator, every innovator, once faced the same fears. The difference is not that they had less fear, but that they decided to act anyway. They understood that fear could be a guide, not a gatekeeper, that beyond fear was not danger, but discovery, and so they moved forward, not recklessly, but consciously. Step by step, breath by breath, they walked beyond their illusionary limits, and in doing so, they expanded not only what they could do, but who they could become. The human mind has a deep craving for certainty. It is wired to seek patterns, predictability, and safety. From the earliest stages of life, we are taught to seek out stability, through routines, through education, through rules and systems designed to minimize chaos. And while this desire for certainty can provide structure, it can also become a trap. It begins to prioritize what is known, even if it is limiting, over what is unknown, even if it holds potential. The mind begins to associate unfamiliarity with danger, and in doing so, it avoids the very paths that lead to transformation. This preference for certainty often takes the form of avoidance. People avoid making bold decisions, not because they are incapable, but because they cannot guarantee the outcome. They avoid trying something new unless they can predict how it will end. They stay in jobs they dislike, relationships that no longer grow, and routines that feel hollow because those things are familiar. They may not be fulfilling, but at least they are predictable, and for many, predictability feels safer than possibility. When someone considers taking a risk, their mind begins to generate scenarios. What if I fail? What if people laugh? What if I lose everything? These thoughts are not rooted in the present moment, but in imagined futures. Yet they feel real, and they activate real emotions: anxiety, hesitation, doubt. The mind clings to the certainty of staying still, because movement means facing the unknown, and the unknown, even if it offers freedom, is often painted by the mind as something threatening. This is why so many people delay important decisions. They wait for the right time, the perfect moment, the complete plan. They tell themselves that once they feel more prepared, they will act. But that moment rarely comes. Because preparation is not the absence of uncertainty, it is the willingness to proceed in spite of it. Growth never offers a full guarantee. There is always a risk. There is always something that might not work. But there is also something that might change your life entirely. The desire for certainty becomes even stronger in a society that praises perfection. People are taught that failure is shameful, that mistakes are to be avoided. So they begin to measure success not by how much they've learned, but by how few times they've stumbled. This creates a mindset that views risk as something reckless rather than something necessary. It leads people to make choices that protect their image, not their potential, and in doing so, they sacrifice the chance to grow for the illusion of staying safe. But the truth is, certainty is often an illusion. Nothing in life is truly predictable. Circumstances change, opportunities appear and disappear. Even the things we believe are stable, our jobs, our health, our relationships, can shift in an instant. Clinging to certainty is like trying to grasp water. The tighter you hold it, the more it slips through your fingers. Real strength comes not from resisting uncertainty, but from learning to move with it, to breathe within it, to make decisions not because the outcome is known, but because the action is aligned with who you wish to become. Taking risks is not about being reckless. It is about trusting that even if you fall, you will learn to rise. It is about realizing that the path to mastery in anything, art, business, love, self-understanding, requires stepping into spaces where you are not yet comfortable. Certainty may give you control, but growth asks for surrender. It asks you to give up the need to know, and instead develop the capacity to respond. to trust in your adaptability, to believe that you can handle what comes, even if you don't know what that is yet. When a person begins to understand this, something shifts. They no longer see uncertainty as a threat, but as a teacher. They begin to welcome discomfort, not because it is pleasant, but because they know it holds insight. They start choosing actions based on alignment with their values, not the probability of success. And in doing so, they start to live more authentically, more freely, not bound by fear, but guided by purpose. The more you lean into uncertainty, the more you realize that life's most meaningful experiences are never found in the places where everything is known. They are found in the moments where you take a step without having all the answers, in the conversations that begin without a script, in the decisions that don't promise a result, but offer a possibility. These are the moments that shape your character, test your spirit, and reveal your true potential. True discipline is often misunderstood. Many people associate it with rigid routines, strict control, and the constant suppression of impulses. But real discipline is not about denying emotion or eliminating risk. It is about understanding both and knowing how to navigate through them with clarity. Discipline is not the rejection of risk, but the conscious engagement with it. It is the ability to approach uncertain and challenging situations with awareness, presence, and self-command. In every decision that involves risk, there is a point where emotion begins to rise. Fear, anxiety, doubt. These emotions can cloud judgment and slow momentum. A person without discipline gets overwhelmed by these emotions. They either freeze or retreat, but a disciplined mind does not ignore the emotion. It observes it. It watches the fear, feels the hesitation, but does not let those feelings dictate the action. Instead, it pauses, reflects, and then moves forward based on intention, not reaction. Discipline is the capacity to do what is necessary, even when it is uncomfortable, especially when it is uncomfortable. It is easy to take risks when the stakes are low and the rewards are high, but discipline reveals itself in the moments when the outcome is uncertain, when the pressure is high, and when the easiest option is to step back. The disciplined person understands that discomfort is part of growth. They have trained themselves not to run from the burn of effort, but to sit with it, learn from it, and act through it. This form of discipline is developed over time through consistent choices made in small moments. It is built in silence, when no one is watching, and in solitude, when the only battle is internal. It is forged by doing the hard things, not once, but repeatedly, until the act of rising above fear becomes a habit. Not because fear has disappeared, but because discipline has become stronger than the need to feel safe. Managing risk with discipline also means preparation. It means studying the terrain before stepping onto it. A disciplined person does not take reckless chances. They calculate, they reflect, they anticipate what may come. They don't seek to eliminate risk, because they know that is impossible, but they seek to understand it, to reduce unnecessary errors, and to strengthen their ability to respond. It is like a martial artist who trains every day not just to fight, but to remain calm when danger appears. The discipline is not in the punch, it is in the mind behind it. People who live without discipline often live in extremes. Either they avoid all risk because they fear failure, or they throw themselves into risk without awareness, hoping to get lucky. Both paths are unstable. True discipline walks the middle path. It neither avoids nor clings. It acts with mindfulness, using both emotion and logic, both heart and head. It is not afraid to take the leap, but it does so with intention. Discipline also involves the ability to stay committed once the risk has been taken. Many people are excited at the beginning of a journey. They are energized by vision and possibility, but as obstacles arise, as doubt creeps in, their motivation fades. This is where discipline becomes the anchor. It is the force that keeps a person aligned with their purpose even when progress is slow. It reminds them that challenges are not a sign of failure, but a part of the process. Discipline doesn't chase outcomes. It commits to the process. In moments of setback or uncertainty, discipline allows a person to regulate their mind. Instead of spiraling into frustration or panic, They return to their practice, to their breath, to the foundations they have built over time. Whether it is through meditation, movement, journaling, or reflection, they know how to return to center, and from that center they make their next decision, not from fear, but from grounded awareness. It is important to understand that discipline is not a fixed trait. It is not something one is born with. It is cultivated through repeated effort. It is built every time you do something that stretches you, every time you choose consistency over comfort, every time you align your actions with your deeper values instead of your passing moods. And it is through this ongoing discipline that risk transforms from something to avoid into something to engage with consciously. Those who lack discipline often allow their fears to become louder than their goals, but those who build discipline give themselves an edge. They do not wait for motivation. They do not depend on inspiration. They act because they have made a decision to live intentionally. In this way, they are able to face the uncertainty of risk with strength, not just once, but again and again, because their actions are not based on how they feel in the moment. They are rooted in who they have decided to become. Every risk taken consciously opens a door into the unknown, and it is in the unknown that self-discovery truly begins. When life is lived within the boundaries of comfort and predictability, the identity one holds is rarely questioned. A person believes they are what they've been told, what they've repeated to themselves, what their environment has reflected back. But once a risk is taken, once the familiar is left behind, this constructed identity is shaken, and the deeper self begins to emerge. There is a kind of mirror that only risk can provide. It reveals the parts of a person that would remain hidden without pressure or adversity. Strengths are uncovered not by talking about them, but by being placed in situations where they must be used. Resilience is not developed by staying comfortable, but by being tested, stretched, and challenged. When someone steps into a risk consciously, they give themselves permission to meet parts of themselves they have never encountered. Conscious risk is not about recklessness. It is not jumping blindly. It is the deliberate decision to move beyond the known while remaining aware, grounded, and observant. When this kind of risk is taken, experience becomes a kind of inner training. The external challenge acts as a tool to shape the internal world. As difficulties arise, emotions surface: fear, doubt, confusion. But rather than avoiding them, the individual begins to understand them. These emotional responses are not weaknesses. They are signals. They point toward what still needs to be understood, healed, or transformed. When someone chooses to face risk with open eyes, they begin to reframe the experience of discomfort. Instead of seeing it as a threat, they begin to see it as a gateway. The unfamiliar becomes a space. Growth, the failure becomes feedback. The fear becomes an invitation. Each risk then becomes more than an action. It becomes a ritual of shedding old beliefs, outdated self-images, and inherited limitations. It becomes a process of stepping into authenticity. The journey of self-discovery through risk is rarely immediate. It unfolds slowly, moment by moment. It begins with doubt, then moves into resistance, followed by effort, clarity, and eventually realization. Each step taken outside the comfort zone becomes a lesson not just in action, but in identity. A person learns what they are willing to fight for, what they value, what drives them when no one is watching. They begin to see the gap between who they thought they were and who they are becoming. In the absence of risk, life can become mechanical. One day mirrors the next. Choices are made out of habit rather than intention. But when a person chooses risk, they awaken something within. They begin to live more consciously. They make decisions not just for convenience, but for meaning. And in doing so, they begin to carve out a life that reflects their inner truth rather than their external conditioning. There is a depth of wisdom that comes from doing difficult things, not because one enjoys difficulty, but because within it lies the capacity to expand. With each risk taken consciously, a person learns to trust themselves more, not just their abilities, but their capacity to adapt, to recover, to learn. This trust becomes the foundation for greater courage. It becomes the silent voice that says, "I have been here before. I can go further." The greatest shift occurs when the need for approval begins to fade. Risk teaches that external validation is fleeting and inconsistent. What matters more is the inner alignment, the sense of living a life that feels real. A person who consistently chooses conscious risk begins to orient their choices based on growth, not applause. They stop asking, "Will this be accepted?" and begin asking, "Is this who I truly am?" In that shift, authenticity is born. What once looked impossible begins to feel natural. What once seemed terrifying becomes familiar, and through this continued engagement with conscious risk, a person slowly transforms, not into someone else, but into more of who they always were. The masks fall away, the roles dissolve. What is left is something quieter, stronger, more certain. A sense of self that is not based on achievement or image, but on experience, on knowing, on truth. And that self can only be discovered by walking through the uncertainty that conscious risk demands. In the end, the reason most people don't take risks is not because they are incapable, but because they have been conditioned to believe that comfort is safety and that certainty is success. But life was never meant to be lived in stillness. Growth asks for movement, mastery asks for effort, fulfillment asks for courage. The fears we avoid become the limits we live by. Yet the moment we begin to challenge those fears, when we step outside our illusionary boundaries, face the unknown with discipline, and embrace risk not as a threat, but as a teacher, we begin to unlock our true potential. Taking risks doesn't mean acting without thought. It means acting with purpose despite uncertainty. It means being willing to feel discomfort, willing to fail, willing to discover what lies beyond the version of ourselves we've always known. Each conscious risk we take becomes a step toward authenticity, toward inner strength, toward the person we are capable of becoming. And in that journey we no longer ask, "What if I fall?" We begin to ask, "What if I rise?"